What happens when one country becomes the battlefield of a global power struggle? In 1950, a brutal war erupted on the Korean Peninsula. Cities were destroyed, millions of lives were lost, and families were permanently divided. But this war wasn't just about Korea. It was one of the first major confrontations of the Cold War, where communist and capitalist powers fought for influence. And even today, the consequences of that war still shape the world. This is the story of the Korean War, the war that divided Korea. For centuries, Korea existed as a unified kingdom with a shared culture, language, and identity. But everything changed during World War II. Before the war ended, Korea had been under Japanese rule for decades. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Korea was suddenly free. But instead of independence, the country was divided into two occupation zones. The Soviet Union controlled the north. The United States controlled the south. A temporary line was drawn across the peninsula at the 38th parallel. This line was supposed to be temporary, but it would soon become permanent. As tensions between global powers increased, Korea became another battleground of ideology. In the north, a communist government was formed under Kim Il-sung, supported by the Soviet Union. In the south, a separate government was established under Syngman Rhee, backed by the United States. By 1948, Korea was no longer one country. Two nations had formed. North Korea, South Korea, both governments claimed they were the legitimate rulers of all Korea. War was becoming inevitable. On June 25, 1950, everything exploded into violence. North Korean forces suddenly crossed the 38th parallel and launched a massive invasion of South Korea. Within days, their army advanced rapidly southward, capturing the capital city, Seoul. South Korea's army was overwhelmed. It looked like the entire peninsula would fall to the north. But the conflict quickly drew the attention of the world. The United Nations voted to intervene and defend South Korea. A coalition of countries sent troops, but the majority came from the United States. The forces were commanded by Douglas MacArthur. In September 1950, MacArthur launched a daring counterattack known as the Battle of Incheon. The surprise landing turned the tide of the war. United Nations forces pushed the North Korean army back across the 38th parallel. For a moment, it looked like the war might end quickly, but another powerful nation was about to enter the fight. As UN forces advanced toward the Chinese border, China saw the move as a threat. Thousands of Chinese soldiers suddenly crossed into Korea. The new offensive shocked UN forces. Chinese and North Korean troops pushed them all the way back south again. The capital, Seoul, changed hands multiple times during the war. The conflict had now become a deadly stalemate. From 1951 to 1953, the war settled into a brutal deadlock. Both sides fought fiercely along the front lines near the 38th parallel. Battles for small hills and trenches caused massive casualties but gained little territory. The war turned into something similar to World War I, with trenches, artillery bombardments, and constant fighting. Meanwhile, civilians suffered the most. Entire cities were destroyed. Millions of Koreans were killed, wounded, or displaced. Families were separated, many never seeing each other again. After years of bloody fighting, negotiations finally began. In 1953, both sides agreed to stop the war. The Korean Armistice Agreement was signed, but there was a shocking detail. No official peace treaty was ever created. Technically, North and South Korea are still at war today. A heavily fortified buffer zone called the Korean Demilitarized Zone was established between the two countries. It remains one of the most heavily guarded borders on Earth. The Korean War permanently divided the Korean Peninsula. Today, the two Koreas are dramatically different. South Korea became one of the world's most advanced economies and democracies. North Korea became one of the most isolated and heavily militarized countries in the world. The war also shaped global politics for decades. It solidified the tensions of the Cold War and showed how dangerous ideological conflicts between superpowers could become. More than 70 years later, the Korean War still casts a long shadow. Families remain separated, the border remains closed, and peace on the peninsula remains uncertain. The war that began in 1950 didn't just divide a country. It created one of the most enduring conflicts in modern history. If you enjoyed this historical documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories that shaped our world. Because history isn't just about the past. It explains the world we live in today.